Hi, Shalom Chaverim. Well, Purim has come and gone. And I certainly hope that you had a wonderful time. It's actually an exhilarating day in the Jewish calendar. So now we're putting away our masquerade costumes, counting the calories that we ingested, and making the house ready. And what next? Well, if you're a Jewish housewife, you answer immediately, what do you mean, what next? We only have 30 days for Passover, so we already have to start preparing for the next holiday. And isn't that wonderful? But that's 30 days from now. So what next? Well, I've seen bumper stickers that say, hang in there, Shabbos is coming, which is another way of saying you're never more than 130 hours away from a day of rest and a day of rejuvenation. Okay, you might acknowledge that, but what next? Well, what we're really asking at times is, how do we get the holiday to continue? Not the actual feasting and merrymaking, but how do we actually keep some of the spirit and the inspiration? Well, let me share with you a story. It's a legend. They claim that it happened in the days of King David. And let's see if you could derive a lesson from this episode. The story goes that in ancient Israel, there were two neighbors. This goes back thousands of years before the Bank of America. And when people had savings, they would keep it in their home. And there was one farmer who, knowing that one day would have to retire, and in the meantime also knew that he was going to provide for a dowry for his daughters, painstakingly gathered coin by coin and was able to accumulate, in his estimation, a fortune. And where did he keep his coins? In a jug, in a simple a jug made out of pottery. And he would every single day make sure that the pot or the jug was filled and covered and protected. Well, one day this farmer had to leave for a couple of months and wanted to make sure that his treasure would remain intact. So he was thinking, what should he do? He didn't want to try to hide it in the ground. He thought that would become too apparent. Maybe someone might see him digging a hole. On the other hand, just closing the door and leaving it unprotected was unthinkable. So the most obvious thing would be to give it to someone that he knows or a neighbor. The problem was that people are just simply human. And when they're given a treasure like this of many, many coins, who knows if they'll be able to hold themselves back from using it. And he thought of a very simple and what he thought was a profound idea. What he did was he transferred the coins into the equivalent of maybe a 5-gallon jug, and he put it into the jug and then poured in honey. And the honey came to the top, and there was a stopper. When you opened up the stopper, all you saw was honey. If you stuck your finger into the opening of the stopper, you tasted honey. He figured, who's going to steal a 5-gallon jug of honey? So he goes over to his neighbor and he says, my dear friend Shimon, I have a request. I'm going away for an extended period of time. Would you be able to watch my 5-gallon jug of honey? And he said, of course I could. But you know what? I just want to make sure that the terms are very clear. So why don't you write on the jug your name, and in front of 2 witnesses, we will witness that you're giving me this jug of honey, and at the end of the 4 months, I'll give you back the same jug of honey. And that was perfect. So he writes his name on the jug. 2 people witnessed how on this and this day, a jug of honey was transferred from so-and-so to Shimon, and when this man comes back, Shimon will give him back the same jug of honey. And it was duly noted and notarized. And he gives it to his neighbor Shimon, and he leaves secure that everything will be fine. Well, little did he know that his friend Shimon was not a bad man at all, but just merely human. What had happened was that one time this Shimon fellow was making a gigantic party and ran very low on honey. So he's thinking, what should I do? What should I do? I need honey desperately. Where am I going to find a 5-gallon jug of honey? And he realized that he had something from his neighbor. He figured, you know what I'll do? I'll just pour out honey. And certainly before my neighbor comes back, I'll fill it up again with honey. It's not going to be a major difference. In fact, there'll be no difference. Honey is honey. And I'm sure if he would have been here, he would have agreed. Well, whether or not halachically this is permitted, I do not know, but that's what he did. So he picked up the jug of honey and felt it was unusually heavy and started to pour it out, but only after a couple of ounces it stopped. There was something blocking the narrow spout. So he took like a stick or something to try to figure out what could possibly be blocking it, and he actually discovered that it was a coin. Now he realized that there's other things in this jug besides honey. And his evil inclination got the better of him, and he began to play and maneuver and pour, and out came one coin after another coin and after another coin. After he finished as much as possible pouring out the coins, he quickly washed them and used them for his own purposes. Of course, at the earliest opportunity, what he did was he refilled it with honey. 4 months later, his neighbor comes and he says, Shimon, I brought you a little gift. I want to thank you. Oh, you're very welcome, very kind. It's not necessary. No, please take it. Gives him the gift. And he says, do you have the jug? He says, certainly. But the same way you gave it to me with witnesses, I just want to make sure that the witnesses witness that I'm giving to you, returning it. So they bring the two fellows, and Shimon goes, picks the one that says his name on it, picks it up and carries it to his house. And as he's carrying it, something does not feel right, and he's apprehensive. As soon as he gets into the house, he immediately sticks in a stick, and it goes straight to the bottom. There are no coins, and he realized he's been deceived. He runs back to Shimon. He says, Shimon, where are my coins? And Shimon has this innocent face. What are you talking about? You gave me a jug of honey, and I returned the jug of honey. Is there something wrong with the honey? He says, stop playing games with me. You know what I'm talking about. He says, actually, I don't. And he takes out the record. On this and this day, you gave me a 5-gallon jug of honey. It was duly witnessed and notarized. And why are you accusing me of this terrible thing? Well, he realized that there was really very little that he could do. So he went to the wise sage of the village and poured out his heart. And the wise sage said, I really cannot read your heart or his heart. My feeling is you're telling me the truth, because this is such an outlandish story. I doubt that you would make it up. But what could we do? You told him it was honey. It was witnessed as honey, and it was returned. Are you sure it's the same jug? He said, yeah, it's my handwriting is on it. He said, well, if that's the case, I don't know how to advise you. However, there is justice. King David is a wise and a pious king. And every day he has time open for ordinary subjects to go. Why don't you bring your neighbor to the king, and perhaps in his wisdom he will figure out a solution. Well, he goes over to the neighbor and he says, Shimon, if you don't want me to ruin your reputation, let's settle it now. Give me back my coins. Shimon says, if you don't want me to throw you out of my house, leave. He says, then at least come with me to the king. He said, I have to go to Jerusalem anyway. Fine. Travel to the king, and the king is sitting on his royal throne, He's surrounded by wise people. There's a long line of petitioners, and he comes together with Shimon carrying an empty jug, and Shimon begins, Your Majesty, my neighbor gave me a 5-gallon jug of honey. This is the jug. It was filled to the top with honey. I gave it to him back, filled to the top with honey. Now he's claiming that it was actually filled with coins. Your Majesty, how am I supposed to deal with him? King David looks at the other fellow. He looks honest. And with tears in his eyes, he says, Your Majesty, it is true what he said. This is the jug. And it was filled to the top with honey, but there was more than honey in it. There were coins in it. And I only covered it up with honey so to camouflage that fact. I don't know how my neighbor found out about it, but he poured it out, took the coins, refilled it, and he began to weep. I have no other proof than what I'm telling you is true. Please, Your Majesty, look into my heart. Well, King David was able to see truth and was able to see deep into the hearts of men and realize he's telling the truth. So once again, he looks at Shimon and he says, Do you agree that this is what he gave you? This is the jug. Yes, Your Majesty. And he says to Naaman, are you disagreeing? No, this is the jug. We both agree this is the jug. So the king said, then fine. He called for the soldier and he said, take a stick and break the jug in front of the court. Well, unhesitatingly, he walked a couple of steps, took out his lance, broke the jug, and now there were scattered shards on the ground. And both Shimon and his neighbor are looking, what does the king want? Then the king says to Shimon, pick up these shards and bring them to me. Yes, Your Majesty. And he brings over 8 or 9 shards. The king examines them and turns them over. And on one of the shards, there's a coin that's stuck to the pottery. He then turns to everyone and to Shimon. He says, do you still keep your side of the story? How is it possible in a 5-gallon jug of honey that there should be a coin? It is not the way you said it. And of course, when Shimon saw the king's, how clever he was, in addition to which he was quite scared of the court and the court system of justice, he actually confessed. So this is a legend about the wisdom and practicality of our first king, David, king of Israel. No, did you figure it out yet? What's the connection of the story to how we're going to solve the problem of how to keep Purim going? It's obvious, my friends. You see, every holiday is sweet, very sweet, sweeter than honey. And we're trying to figure out that with the sweetness of the holiday, there's also values of the holiday. There are also teachings of the holiday, and there are lessons of the holiday. And what we have to do is make sure that the lessons get stuck, stay with us. Just don't use the sweetness that there's nothing there. So how do we do that? Well, let me just give one simple suggestion, just one simple suggestion. If you had a terrific vacation, what do you bring back with you? Well, some bring back an empty wallet. Some bring back a tan. But almost everyone brings back memories. Memories in the form of a photograph. What are you supposed to do with those photographs? Oh, I am so sorry, a photograph. Digital. It's all on the computer. What are you supposed to do? Let me tell you what I think you should do. You come home 3 weeks later, you're tired, and you need an uplift. And then what you do is you open up your album, and you start looking at those pictures, and you just relax and say, "Well, I remember what I did there." And then you begin to describe it to yourself or to someone sitting next to you. Here's where we went snorkeling, and here's, you see this? And this is this wonderful place we visited, and here was the great food that we ate. And you know something? When you talk about it, it's not only something that you remember, but you're actually reliving it to a certain extent. And then suddenly for 15 minutes, you've been transported back to that magical time called vacation. And you should leave this 15 minutes somewhat more relaxed and content. So I think at the very least, we all have images of this great holiday. I think we should play it in our mind. How did we act during the day? Who did we meet during the day? When we were feasting and celebrating, how did we feel? What thoughts were going through our mind? To whom did we have a conversation? What did our masquerade look like? When you actually relive these moments, and then you go back to the synagogue where we heard the Megillah and so on, this actually should not only remind you of what happened, but also remind you of your mood. You were proud and vibrantly Jewish. That's something that I want to continue. So yes, there are only today 29 days left to Passover. So we have something to count and look forward to. But in the meantime, we already have gold and sweetness already within us. So friends, good luck in your Passover preparations. And may we celebrate, as the rabbis put it, one redemption, which is the redemption from that evil tyrant Haman, and then coming up another redemption from that wicked tyrant called Pharaoh, from one redemption to another redemption to the final redemption with the coming of the Mashiach. Amen.